So corporate sales will give you predictability, but with a ceiling. And high ticket closing will give you freedom, but with responsibility. So if you're in corporate sales or you've started to look into high ticket closing and you want a genuine understanding of what the real differences are, then this video is going to be for you. I'm going to break down the pros and the cons of both so you can actually decide which path actually fits the life that you want. No hype, no BS, all without bias as well. And the reason that I am going to be well placed to answer this question is because I've spent 12 years in sales, and I've spent 6 of those in corporate sales and 6 of those in remote high ticket closing. I have lived both models. I have seen who they're for and, more importantly, who they're not for. And something to bear in mind is that most people who are in corporate sales, they aren't struggling because they're bad at sales, because they do show up, they hit targets, they do what they're asked. But over time, something starts to feel off when you're in corporate. Your income doesn't really match with the effort you put in or your experience or your skill level. You're busy all day, but most of that work doesn't actually make you more money. When I was in corporate, I just felt like a busy idiot. I felt that I was productive, but I was really capped on what I could do. You just hit this ceiling that you can't seem to break through. But before we go any further, I want to be clear that this video isn't about slagging off corporate sales. It isn't to push everyone into high ticket closing, because corporate sales is legitimate and high ticket closing is legitimate, but they're just built for 2 different types of people. So I'm going to start with corporate sales, and I'm going to break down my honest experience of what I went through and what I've seen so many other people go through in corporate as well. So starting out in corporate, I want to share my experience and my story. So look, when I was in corporate sales, I did work very hard. I made it my target to be at the top of the leaderboard in the first 1 or 2 months because I cared about my performance. I wanted to be good, I wanted to progress, and I wanted to make money. That's why we all start in sales. But what I actually felt like the more and more I went on was I felt like a high-level chef who worked in a school cafeteria. I had the skills, I had the ambition, I wanted to do more, but the environment I was in just never reflected the ability that I had. The roles I was in just really relied on basic output, consistency, compliance. So no matter how skilled I became, my earnings never moved. And what it started to feel like is I was Gordon Ramsay assigned to peel onions all day. I had the ability to close deals, but most of my time I'd spend doing admin or chasing people that didn't want to speak to me, sitting in pointless office meetings. I cannot deal with office politics. So it just didn't really feel like I was very suited for that environment. And I even started to question my own ability. And when I look back, and I felt that I was actually selling probably about 15% of the time, but I came here to sell, to close deals and make money. But I never felt I could really do that in the roles that I had. But again, this isn't about me and my story and my biases. It's about an honest reflection of corporate sales versus remote sales. So when it comes to corporate, there are a lot of benefits. Now, the pros of being in corporate sales is that you at least get a predictable income where you'll have your bare minimum, your base pay to fall back on if things don't go the way that you initially planned. We know in corporate sales, months move quickly. There was nothing worse for me than having a great month in sales, but then the first of the month rolls around again, and it just felt like all that work I'd put in, all that high that I was riding just completely went from scratch again. Then it would be panic mode about, oh God, how am I going to then sell all of this again this month? But at least you do have a base pay to fall back onto. So there is more stability. There's more predictable income. There is also a clearer structure of what you can do. And that means there's lower short-term risk. And for a lot of people, especially earlier in life, that is the stuff that matters. They prefer to have security over freedom. They like having the ability to have sick pay and holiday pay, even if that means sacrificing what they're capable of doing or what they're capped at to get it. So if you are someone who values certainty and safety above everything else, then corporate can make a lot more sense. But there are going to be a lot of trade-offs. So let's look at the corporate sales cons. Now, the biggest one is that a salary band will cap you. You have to sacrifice your opportunity for that guaranteed salary, because you won't just take a flat percentage of everything you earn and it be a workable percentage. It will look more like you get a salary and then a tiny bit on top with your commission. Next, it's going to be the commission structures are going to be very limited, because I've been in so many roles where I start to get momentum, I start to get income, and then they just change the commission structures around, so I couldn't earn that good money anymore. So the con really is that capped income with corporate. And then the next one, which is a massive one for me, is that your promotions, they depend on politics rather than performance. You have to be liked by the right people, you have to say the right things, and when it comes down to cold performance, it isn't the thing that's going to dictate whether you progress and get promotion. It comes more down into the management and if they like you or not. And that level of office politics has personally been something that I cannot abide. So if you're like me and you're a bit more anti-authority and you're there to just perform and do well, sometimes you're not rewarded for that in sales. And the next one kind of links to those things. It's being paid on your presence rather than your outcome. No, you're not paid on value, you're paid on time. You're paid if you show up, you do your hours, and yes, you will get commission on top of that. So if you do put in extra hours, then you can earn more commission. But most of the time, when I look at the extra hours I did in corporate sales, if I worked another 10 hours a week, it's not like I would get 25% more, usually about 5 to 10% more if I was lucky. But if I was to pull magic deals out of my ass and pull in a lot more revenue at the end of the month, it's not like I got an extra bonus because of that. I would usually just get a tiny percent, even though I bought in so much more than was expected. The biggest con for me was falling for the OTE trap, because I was a top performer, but I would never get anywhere near what I thought was possible when I joined, or what I was told was possible when I joined. Those OTE targets of, hey, on target earnings of 70k, but you're the top performer and you're only doing 40 to 50. That is the frustration that comes with corporate sales. And I really felt that with one of my roles where I sold for a new homes developer. So over a year, I personally sold 16 mil. We had a development of around 32 units that I sold out, and the average price was around 500k. So I probably even done a little bit over 16 mil. But after that year was finished, what I personally saw from that was about 40k. And that wasn't because I underperformed. Actually, it was the complete opposite. I overperformed and shattered expectations, but I didn't get paid any extra for that. And it wasn't like I was an estate agent or in property as a broker where, yes, I sold 16 mil, but the agency fees would have been a very small percentage of that. I just sold straight for a developer. So I made them 16 mil and got paid 40k. I got paid 0.25% of what I brought in. And that was for me the moment when I realized that I have to find something else. Because if my value is 0.25%, that is not a percentage that I was happy with. And, that put me down the path of all these online business models that I tried and nothing really working. But seeing the potential in those things, that I wasn't ever going to be limited, that I was only ever going to be rewarded for my hard work, that's what made them worth it, rather than just sticking into corporate. And lucky for me, I found high ticket closing. That really was the only thing that gave me consistency. It gave me 5-figure months. It gave me the feeling of being valued for what I bought in. And the funny thing was, is one of my first years, I actually sold 8 times less than the scenario of selling for the new homes developer. I sold 2 mil rather than 16 mil. I got paid over 200k for that because my value was 10% of what I bought in. So the more I bought in, the more I got paid. And that's when I just saw that high ticket closing was a different world, that it wasn't getting paid for showing up or licking your boss's ass or getting there just really doing the bare minimum because I couldn't stand to be there. What it was freedom, but also it was responsibility. I was 100% responsible for my outcomes. But when I was actually willing to work hard, that's how I made over 5 times more by selling 8 times less. So when you look at high ticket closing, here really is the pros, that there isn't really a ceiling on what you can do. I know people in this space, yes, I scaled to 20k months, but I know people who are doing 40, 50, 60k plus. Now, I'll say that isn't an overnight thing. These people are so dedicated to their skill, getting into the right position, working extremely hard to be in a position like that. And they've been in the game for years. But when you look at someone who's been in this game for 3-4 years and is doing 50, 60k a month versus most people in sales who don't even do that a year, that is why I love this space. And that's why the next pro makes so much sense. You're paid directly on performance. Your income is only affected by your close rate, by your skill, by the value you actually bring in, which to me is the most important thing. But some of the other pros of being in remote sales is the remote side of things, because you work for online businesses and you work as an entrepreneur. So you're not expected to turn up to an office once a month. You're not expected to be tied to a location. You can do it anywhere that you want to. When I was a closer, I closed in Canada, in Bali, in Spain, in Greece, in Portugal, in Australia, in Singapore. I've closed in so many different places, and all I needed was my laptop and Wi-Fi. And the next pro alongside the location is the time freedom as well. Now, as a full-time high-ticket closer, you're probably taking about 6 calls a day. You probably have 8 slots open, but 6 people are going to show up on average. But that means you're only really working about 5-6 hours a day, and you get the choice of when you turn your diary on. So if I want to travel the world and work in these different time zones, I can just put my availability alongside the hours I actually want to do. You know, when I was traveling, I would usually do a bit in the morning and a bit in the evening, so I had the days to myself. When I was in Bali, I'd go down to the beach and surf in the day. Or when I was in Australia, I'd take the car out and just go for road trips around the mountains. There was nothing worse for me in corporate sales than sitting there at the end of the day, knowing that all of my work was done, all my clients have been contacted, and I physically couldn't do any more. But I had to sit there for about an hour and a half just because that's what my contract said. So a big one for me in high ticket closing is the control you get over your time. But like I said, this video is not meant to be a push into high ticket closing. It's meant to be an honest reflection. So here are the cons of high ticket closing. And I want to start by being very clear about what high ticket closing isn't. The first one is easy. A lot of people keep saying that this is easy. And yes, if you compare it to a full online business, getting to 10K as a closer is easier than an agency owner or running an e-com business or Amazon or whatever the other models usually are. But it doesn't mean that it's easy. If you come into this space, even from corporate sales, if you have loads of experience, you will be surprised at how highly skilled you need to be in closing to actually make good money. Now, the beauty is you just have to focus on one thing, but if you're not dedicated to going through training, to practicing, to jumping on loads of role plays, to actually nailing the skill, then it isn't the space for you. It's not like corporate sales where you can get away with doing the bare minimum. The next thing is nothing is guaranteed. No one's going to pay you commission. No one owes you a role as a closer. So unless you're coming into this with an entrepreneur's mindset that you have to hunt and find these positions, you have to invest in yourself, get into the right networks, do all the things that everyone who has success in this space does, then again, this space is not for you. The next con is stability in the beginning. When you're first starting out, you might have to go through a few bad offers. You might have to build your experience, especially if you're coming into this with no sales experience, which means it's not going to be stable. You might find an offer that works because they're running a certain offer, or it's the certain time where they get a lot of clients, but then next month it might be half the call volume. If you're not willing to go through this period at the beginning where it's unstable, you have to jump on a few offers before you find that one that gives you the opportunity to earn good money and has a lot more stable calls. If you're not willing to actually stick out when marketing isn't running at its top level and you have 6 calls, but then it turns into 2 calls for a few days. If you're not willing to ride that wave because there's no safety, there's no security, there's no guarantees, then again, this is just not the space for you. If entrepreneurship was you get all of the result without any risk or hard work, then it wouldn't be entrepreneurship. Your income will fluctuate. Your confidence will get shaken. But you have to understand that you are 100% responsible for your outcome, not in just this space, in any space when you work for yourself. So it's really understanding that life exists on a scale of freedom and security. You cannot have both, so you have to find what is most important to you. So next, I want to talk about timeframes. So what does progression actually look like with both of these things? If you look at the classic, the 10K month, what does it actually take to get there in corporate sales? Now for me, I don't know many people who hit 10K in corporate. The ones I do happen to sell in a very lucrative industry, but they needed at least 5 years to get there. Now that is usually a best case scenario because I know a lot more people in corporate sales who have been there from 5 to 15 years and never really broken 10K. For most corporate sales jobs, if you're clearing 3K a month, that's not a bad thing, but it usually takes 2 to 3 years to get there. And then from there, getting up to the 50, 60, 70K usually takes another 5 years. So realistically, in corporate sales, you are looking at best case 5 years, more averagely, probably 8 to 10 years until you're hitting the 10K a month. But again, you have to look at the trajectory. It's going to be a lot more safe and a lot more secure to get there. But if you look at high ticket closing, now the trajectory I build people for a 10K month depends on their experience and also depends on how hard they want to work. So let's just assume that you're coming into this process with the ability to actually work hard, to stay consistent, and you're someone who focuses on the skill of selling. So usually my quickest time frame for getting someone there has been 8 weeks. But again, we're not looking at the outliers. The usual path I build for people with both sales experience and the hunger to come in and work hard is 6 to 9 months. Now, the usual trajectory that we look at is 3 months to find your first role, 3 months to then ramp up and hit your first 10K, and after that to keep improving sales skills and then finally land a more legitimate offer that sells for a higher price. If you look at this space and see the opportunities at 20, 30, 40k plus, they're the people who are selling offers that cost 10k plus. So one sale will make you a K commission. But an offer that knows it has the ability to give someone 20k a month is not going to take anyone on board unless they are 100% confident they're at the top of their game. So if you have less than 6 months experience as a closer, then it is almost impossible to be placed with one of these unicorn offers that can give you a 10, 20, 30k a month straight away. So most people who make it to this point, they build up with an offer. They find an offer that is on that growth trajectory and they build their skills with that offer. That's what I done. I was only earning 3-4k when I started as a closer, but I built up with my offer. We actually raised our prices. We changed to just take sales calls rather than me calling through a database and taking sales calls. And that's how I scaled up to the 10 and then the 20. But if you're someone who comes into this space with no sales experience, then yes, again, I had outliers like Charlie, 20 years old, no sales experience, marketing assistant. She hit her first 10k in about 6 months. But for most people, you need to really look at 12 to 18 months to hit that point. And again, that's because you need to build your experience. You need to get legitimate offers to see you as a legitimate player in this space who has a track record of success. So they want to see call recordings. They want to see commission sheets. They want to see your figures. And that needs to be built up over time. But then when you hit that, when you've got 6 months experience under your belt, then you're going to be able to attract an amazing offer as a closer. And it doesn't matter if you've had no sales experience before that, but if you get 6 months experience closing, that will unlock a lot more doors. From the outside in, all these things sound good in a quick YouTube video. But the reality is I've worked with hundreds of people, and the ones that I've seen actually make it in this space, it doesn't matter if they have experience or not. We look for other things. And sometimes people who come from corporate, they actually do worse in this space because they're used to putting in the bare minimum. They're used to moaning about their jobs. They're ones who avoid responsibility. They want all the outcomes without really putting. They want the extraordinary outcome without putting the extraordinary amount of effort to get there. But then there was always this group of people I worked with who wanted more. They believed in their ability. They were more than happy to put the work in as long as they knew it was going to lead somewhere they wanted to be. And some of those people have had corporate experience and some of those people have had no sales experience. But the reason they got there is because they were coachable, they were hungry, and they were willing to put in the work to get there. Like I said, at the end of the day, this space just comes down to freedom and security. Corporate sales will give you predictability, but just a lot of limits too. And high ticket closing will give you freedom, just with a lot of responsibility too. So neither is technically right or wrong, but understand for yourself where you sit on that scale. What is more important to you in life? Is it being secure or is it being free and having control? Because neither is the wrong answer. There's just one right answer for you. So this does resonate with you. If high ticket closing does seem like the path forward, well then just make sure you stay tuned to the page because we've got so much more videos on the way. And if you have any questions about high ticket closing, just go onto my Instagram page, Mr. Connor Williams, and just drop me a message. I'm always happy to spend some time going through questions. So I hope this has given you a clearer picture, the differences between remote sales and corporate. And I hope to see you in the next video.